So today's video will be all about ancient Vedas again, or I should probably say one of the ancient Upanishads. And it talks about how to actually find eternal joy. So they make a difference between just plain happiness and soul joy, as they would describe it in their scriptures. So today I wanted to share with you one of the ways that they taught in ancient times how one could actually discover this nature of joy within themselves by analyzing this universe that they find themselves in. So basically, we should understand in what universe we are currently. Usually we don't really consider that, we just go through life. But by understanding the difference between the finite and infinite, that, according to the Upanishads, is where you will find true joy. Now, the names in these Upanishads tend to be a little unusual for us in the West, so for today's video, instead of trying to pronounce the names of these two characters in question, I'll just use the words student and sage instead, so you understand who is saying what in this dialogue. Now let's begin. Once a student approached the sage and requested him to show him the path of knowledge and teach him about the highest truth. "Tell me what you know, and then I will teach you what is beyond that," thus said the sage to the student. Then the student told him with all humility, "I know the four Vedas and the epics. I have studied grammar, rituals, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, psychology, the fine arts and various other secular subjects. But all this knowledge has not helped me to know the self. I have heard from spiritual teachers like you that one who realizes the self goes beyond sorrow. I am lost in sorrow. Please teach me how to go beyond." Now, here it also points out by somebody else's commentary on the subject that there is a very long dialogue between the student and sage, through which it is revealed that all the student knows were mere names. So saying that he knew the four Vedas, etc. was just names. So he has to go beyond it. One must know what is greater than the name. Then he reveals that speech is greater than name. Mind is greater than speech. Will is greater than mind. Consciousness is greater than will. Meditation is greater than consciousness. Understanding is greater than meditation. Power is greater than understanding. Food is greater than power. Water is greater than food. Light or heat is greater than water. Ether is greater than light. And Atman or spirit is greater than ether and is the substratum of everything else. Man is always impelled to do things on account of joy or the pleasure that he gets out of the things that he does. No one acts or does anything unless motivated by some kind of pleasure or joy. But it is the infinite that is the source of abiding joy, because it is not subject to change. Therefore one must seek to know the infinite. With this, the sage now teaches the student the nature of the infinite. Where one realizes the indivisible unity of life, sees nothing else, hears nothing else, knows nothing else. That is the infinite. The infinite is beyond death, but the finite cannot escape death. At this point, the student raises a question. On what does the infinite depend, O vulnerable one? To this, the sage replied by expounding, "Dear student, the infinite depends on its own glory. No, not even that. In the world, people think they can attain glory by having cows and horses, elephants and gold, family and servants, fields and mansions. But I do not call that glory, for here one thing depends on another. But the infinite is utterly independent. The infinite is above and below, before and behind, to the right and to the left. I am all this. The self is above and below, before and behind, to the right and to the left. I am all this. One who meditates on the self and realizes the self sees the self everywhere and rejoices in the self. Such a one lives in freedom and is at home wherever he goes. He discovers that everything in the cosmos, energy and space, fire and water, names and forms, birth and death, mind and will, word and deed, mantra and meditation, all come from the self. He goes beyond decay and death, beyond separateness and sorrow. But those who pursue the finite are blind to the self and live in bondage. Therefore, control the senses and purify the mind. In a pure mind there is a constant awareness of the self. Where there is constant awareness of the self, freedom ends bondage and joy ends sorrow. Thus the sage taught the pure student to go beyond bondage, beyond sorrow, beyond darkness, to the light of the self. Now this is absolutely fascinating and beautiful if we really consider it. Some of the terminology they use in the East is completely different than us in the West. Saying the term self, etc. It's kind of uncommon in Western philosophy and esoteric teachings. But if we just consider for a moment how they looked at life and what they're trying to convey here to us, seeking more of the truth behind this physical phenomena that we are currently experiencing, well then these texts really give us an indication on where to look and how to go about this. What I personally find beautiful is that part where they talk about having this awareness of the self constantly in our consciousness. So in a pure mind there is a constant awareness of the self. Where there is constant awareness of the self, freedom ends bondage and joy ends sorrow. Now why would this be? Because if you realize the self that you really are on a cosmic level, well then you know that you're not really your physical body or limitations at all. Therefore that freedom that you rediscover basically ends the bondage you had to this flesh, you could say. Now, it doesn't mean that you suddenly get superpowers, etc. with your physical body. No, this body itself is always in a form of limitation and bondage to this physical realm. But you understand the difference between yourself, the inner self, and the physical self. That's what we want to discover. Because as long as we operate from the idea that we are our physical self, then we will experience a lot of sorrow. For the simple fact that, physically speaking, there is a lot of suffering. That's just a fact. But by understanding the spiritual part of ourselves, we can outgrow and look beyond the suffering that we normally experience. That to me is what it means to look and seek to know the infinite, where eternal joy resides. Now if you found this video inspiring, please hit the like button below. And if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.